Hello. Okay, so in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to tell you a few things about how viruses shape the world, our history, evolution, and the very planet itself. And there's going to be some audience participation, so get ready for a survey in a few slides' time. So let's talk about history first. So when the Spanish arrived in the Americas, it wasn't necessarily just their armor, their swords, and their Bibles that helped them establish themselves on this continent. It was something else as well. They brought along with them a large number of animals. They brought along pigs and cows and sheep and goats, and Old MacDonald would have been proud of these guys. And these animals, the Europeans had been living with them for thousands of years, but in the Americas, there wasn't actually that much animal husbandry. And so the Native Americans had not become immune to all of these zoonotic viruses that come along with living with animals. So you have influenza coming from pigs and chickens. You have smallpox coming from horses. You have measles coming from cows. And so when the initial explorers left, escaped animals remained behind, and the thought is that perhaps these animals helped spread viruses that caused this precipitous drop in the Native American population. 95% of the population destroyed between the first exploration and when the real conquistadors came 100 years later and really colonized the Americas and put a big American flag on this continent. And so zoonotic viruses had a big impact, but you don't have to worry too much about smallpox these days, and the reason is that smallpox is too virulent. It's kind of burnt itself out. And so to make that point, I just want to do the quick audience survey. So I want to ask, how many people here have had Ebola? Okay, so how many people have had a cold? Right, so that kind of illustrates my point. The Ebola virus, extremely toxic. It's got a massive mortality rate, but whenever it rises up in the population, it burns itself out in one village. And so there's less than 1,000 infections per year, whereas the common cold, 24 billion infections per year. Pretty successful, and it's because it's not that pathogenic, it can maintain itself. But you can go a lot further than that in terms of being innocuous as a virus. So the common cold, it's a fully fledged virus, has everything it needs to move around from cell to cell. This includes all of this packaging machinery. And it's actually the process of leaving cells and re-entering other cells that causes a lot of the symptoms of viruses. So they're like a fully fledged Swiss Army knife here. But there are other viruses that have lost the ability to move around from cell to cell, and they're just like a stripped down Swiss Army knife. They just have the ability to replicate and jump around within genomes. They're hitchhikers within your genomes. Other viruses that don't even have anything, they're just using the proteins from other viruses that happen to be in your genome. These guys are so innocuous and successful, they make up almost 50% of your genome. So this is a massive contribution to what's going on in what people term sometimes the junk DNA. And this DNA has had consequences on your evolution. So let me just give you one example. Without these viruses, you would be hatching from eggs. So it turns out that the mammals, we all have decrepit genes for vitalogenesis, for egg laying in our genomes. We don't use them anymore, we have live birth. And the reason for that is that one of these viral genes has been co-opted by us to do something useful. So our ancestors were like the platypus or the spiny anteaters, they laid eggs. But now we took one of these viral genes. This gene is the specific gene called the envelope fusion protein. And this protein is used by the virus usually to take the viral membrane and fuse it to the cell membrane to gain entry. So what we've done is we've taken this self-same protein, this fusion protein, and used it in our cells to fuse our own cells together. And so what this does for us is it allows us to create this specialized layer of cells that are all fused into a syncytium, a continuous layer of cells, that forms the interface between the baby's placenta and the mother. And this is what allows mammals to have placental birth and has got us away from this perhaps more convenient process of hatching from an egg. So viruses are the most abundant material in your genome. They're also by far the most abundant biological entities on the planet. So we're looking here at a teaspoon of seawater. It's got 10 million viruses in it, 1 milliliter. And these viruses are playing a huge biogeochemical role in the planet. So the CO2 in the atmosphere, one of the major ways that it's reduced is that these cyanobacteria, these photosynthetic bacteria, take the energy from the sun and grow. And they use CO2 to grow, and they also use nutrients. And as they bloom in these giant bacterial blooms, they deplete all the nutrients from the ocean, and so they would stop, except that there are these billions of bacteriophage viruses breaking those cells open again, releasing nutrients back into the cycle, and allowing the growth of the cyanobacteria to continue, sucking more and more CO2 out of the atmosphere. So it's estimated that the action of these bacteriophages causes the fixation of about 3 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year. So without these viruses, we wouldn't look so much like Earth, we'd look more like a big carbon dioxide greenhouse, more like Venus. So in this lengthy discussion, I hope that I've given you some overview of how viruses have helped shape our history, have shaped our evolution, and the very makeup of the planet in which we live. Thank you.